Hey, and just a quick reminder that the audio-only versions of these Vital MX interviews are available on the Vital MX podcast page. Search for it anywhere you get your pods and let your friends know about it. Hey guys, it's Darkside from Vital MX. Today, I've got Mr. Bob Weber from 6D Helmets. What's going on, Bob?
Not too much. Just working, and as we head up to holiday, actually today, it's on some purchasing at the moment. So kind of nice to take a break from that.
Well, good. I'm glad I can give you a little bit of break. Before we get into 6D, I just want to get a little bit of your background for those that may not know. I know you raced a little bit. You did some off-road. I think you raced motocross at the pro level. Just give us some of your background.
Yeah, I did. I raced motocross pretty much primarily, although I rode I did most of my competitive racing in New England. Made it into the expert class pretty quickly in about a year. Spent 10 years racing as a pro in New England, or an expert, I should say. I did not make my living at motocross, but I rode a few nationals and a couple of supercrosses, and did a bunch of hair scrambles and stuff for a couple of years also, and was going to call it quits in 1985. And then I happened to luck into an overall win at the last race of the year when one of my competitors got a flat front. So I got a second and a third for a first overall. Never won a moto back there straight up, but I did get an overall. And then I decided to ride the next year and broke my kneecap at the first race of that next year. And then, I don't know, made it through the rest of it. I was a top 10 guy back there pretty much every championship, somewhere between 5th and 10th usually. And very much enjoyed that part of my life. But I have Tom White to thank for bringing me to California to be the sales manager at White Brothers in 1990. And I've been in the industry since.
Yeah, that I had heard you worked for White Brothers. So how did that relationship with Tom come about?
It's kind of a long story, but I went to the Cincinnati trade show one year. I took 3 resumes with me, and one of them I handed to Tom. And I did a lot of business with White Brothers back in the day, and Tom seemed to be impressed with the way I'd meet with him and Dan at the trade show, and I'd open my briefcase and I'd have my order pretty much prepared, but then he'd show me all the new stuff and I'd buy a bunch of that too. And when I got back from the show, he said, listen, I'd like you to come out and interview for this job, which was a lot of fun. I flew to California in June, and I interviewed on a Friday. He invited me to race Carlsbad on Saturday on his personal bike. So I said, yeah, I'll do that. And so instead of looking for a place to live and what I should have been doing on Saturday, I went to Carlsbad and raced Saturday motocross. And of all things, you'll probably never believe it. It was June 4th. It rained cats and dogs in Southern California, and it was a complete mud bath. And I won both motos. Going away, I think a bunch of guys left and went home because it was muddy.
Yeah.
But being from New England, I rode that stuff pretty good, and I won the 250 expert class or pro class, whatever it was, and said, okay, I'm moving to California.
That's a cool story.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun. I was Cycle News came out a couple of weeks later, and I showed one of the guys I worked with. I go, hey, check this out. Just don't tell the owner, because at the time I worked for Manchester Honda, and that was a great part of my life also. But I certainly didn't want him to know that I was out job hunting. So
right, yeah. John Anderson from W Wheels, he's the one that told me, you guys worked together at White Brothers. And I have to say, a big regret is never meeting Tom.
Tom was amazing. I can't tell you how much I appreciate him and what a wonderful person he was. Had the, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? He hired a guy from Connecticut to come out and run his sales department, and that was a little weird for me in the beginning because, I think some of the staff at White Brothers will like, well, who the hell's this guy from Connecticut coming to work for White Brothers, right? So I kind of had to earn my place, but I did that well, and I spent about 4 years there with Tom, and I moved on. I had some things I wanted to do on my own, and then about 8 years, and Tom called me and asked me if I would consider coming back to White Brothers after he had sold to the Mag Group. And so I went through that whole vetting process, and that was kind of both sides of that equation. They were vetting me, and I was kind of vetting the new owners and stuff. And so I went back to work for White Brothers a second time as VP, and that just ended up not working out in my favor. I lost that job a year later after never working so hard in my life to implement some of the plans that were in place. But all things happen for a reason. I landed on my feet at TLD and spent about 8.5 years with Troy, and then started 60 after that in about 12 years ago now.
So when you had the idea to start 6D, did you have some background in safety equipment? The basics, did you kind of understand how it worked?
Yes and no. I'm a racer. I always worked on my own bikes, and, got myself to the races, and, just did what I had to do to put my bike on the racetrack every weekend, and, went to Florida for a couple times in the wintertime and raced and all of that. But then I spent, 8 or 9 years in publishing, and I got exposed to a lot of different brands and companies, and, certainly working for White Brothers, we had our hands in a little bit of everything performance related. So we had a suspension shop and a race shop, and, we made pipes, and we sold, we distributed parts and stuff. And then certainly at Troy actually hired me to work on his first motorcycle helmet. I did that as a private contractor, and he asked me if I would help. He was, having some difficulties in getting the project all the way completed. And I had just lost my job at White Brothers and said, okay, well, let me give this some thought. And so we got together and talked about it. And I said, okay, let me write a plan, and we'll just see where it goes. And through that process, he ended up extending me an offer to me to just come and work for the company full time. And, that was an interesting part of my life. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. Quite truthfully, I was kind of tired of working for others, and I've kind of always had an entrepreneurial mindset, and had tried a few things before, but nothing ever really, stuck the way I wanted it to, mostly because I had too many irons in the fire at one time between life and work and trying to do something, but obviously, learned about safety equipment working with Troy and on his product line, and was instrumental in, the helmets that came out there. And then after we parted ways, I was just like, okay, well, this next phase of my life, I want it to be something for myself. And I just had some thoughts and ideas about an improved helmet design, which I had, good knowledge that they needed to be better. But, didn't really, I had the idea, but I didn't know what it was going to take to execute the idea and to bring it to a true part. And, that's where I got in touch with an old friend of mine, Robert Reisinger, who's my business partner here at 6D, one of my partners. And I shared with Robert the concept and, what I thought we could do with the helmet. And, his first question to me was, what are you, freaking crazy? Why would you want to go fight the Bells and Shoeis and Arise of the world and try to make a helmet? And I just said, well, listen, let me send you some stuff to read. And, we'll talk about it. But before we talk about it any further, I want you to understand the problem. And so I sent him a bunch of information about concussion and brain injury and rotational acceleration being the root of brain injury, and some of my ideas on how I thought we could improve the helmet, basically define a better mousetrap. And so I don't know, Robert spent a couple of weeks looking at that. And, meanwhile, I was starting to cobble some things together in my garage. And, we got together, talked about it. And, the biggest challenge was, how are we going to make it, because you're trying to build a suspended ball inside of it's a sphere, and that in its own right presents tons of challenges. And then you're working with EPS, which is super soft. So how are you going to support a suspension system in there? And just all kinds of challenges we came across. But we spent about 6 or 7 months working on some prototypes. I had one prototype that had a bicycle helmet inside of a motorcycle helmet.
Oh, okay.
Like a road cycling helmet. And it was wonderful from an airflow perspective. But, from an energy perspective, we never actually tested that model. But, once we got 6 prototypes together of various different designs, we went to a lab in LA and had them tested. And that's where Dr. Terry Smith was the second professional individual outside of my group to see the helmet and the helmet design. The first was David Tom, who's become a good friend over many years of working in the business, going all the way back to the beginning of the TLD days. But Terry said to me, "What the heck are you doing fooling around with motorcycles?" He's like, "You should have this in military and football helmets." And I'm like, okay, that's exciting to hear and flattering and all that, but I at least believe I can get it made in motorcycles and in the motorcycle market, and motorcyclists need it also. So that's where it all started.
And that's where your passion was. I want to back up a little bit. Generally, helmets were basically a fiberglass shell, and you mentioned EPS liner. That's kind of like the foam, right? The styrofoam that is a typical liner of most helmets. I did some research a little bit, and I read some other articles that have been written with you. And one of the guys actually compared it to like what a coffee cup's made out of, the styrofoam coffee cup. It's basically that soft, just foam.
Yeah, you're correct. It's an expanded polystyrene foam. There's different densities of it, and it can be made and manufactured in different ways to do different things. But at the end of the day, it's a pretty good material for a helmet. It's crushable. It crushes at a real linear rate, and you can define how stiff or soft you want it, and it's moldable. It's easy to shoot into a mold and fill cavities. So you find it inside of automobile dashboards and backing up crush zones in vehicles and things like that, or places where you need something to absorb and distribute energy. But once it's used up, once that's happened, its life is over.
Okay. And some of the research I read, you talked about doing some research on concussions and brain injuries, and you mentioned rotational acceleration, which, from what I read, it causes rotational movement to the brain, because the brain, sort of like your helmet, I guess, if I'm understanding right, is suspended with inside your skull, and it has movement. And that's kind of what you were realizing, right? Is it wasn't typical helmets were not protecting well against that rotational acceleration or rotational movement of the brain. And there was something, I don't remember what it was called, that was getting damaged within the head.
Yeah. You're dead nuts right. What happens in an impact with the ground or another rider or whatever, be it a football player, a motorcycle racer, or a skater in hockey, anybody, any impact with the head, there's a high rate of acceleration of the skull and the head form produced by that impact. And the problem, because the brain is suspended in cerebral fluid inside of your head, it's not really directly attached, if you will, to its surroundings. So you get this radical acceleration of the head form, but the mass of the brain lags behind in that acceleration. And it's that shearing and tearing that causes all of the problems of a concussion or a brain injury. It's that damage created by that event that we're trying to reduce. So we want the helmet to have some kind of isolation or damping capability between its outer shell and its inner liner that is mated to the head form. MIPS has a great solution for this. They have a liner that goes between the head form and the inner surface of the EPS, and that liner is designed to allow the helmet to shear and slip in rotation upon an impact, right? Mm-hmm. MIPS really couldn't get anybody to buy their technology for, I believe they had one contract in place when we started our company, and nobody wanted to go to the expense of adding a licensed liner to their helmet when the market wasn't really crying for a solution. So those guys were way ahead of their time. They addressed the problem. They had a solution for the problem, but nobody wanted to buy it. And I think when we launched 6D, ours is kind of a further on version of that. We do the same thing with the ability to shear, but we also added a suspension component to our system that makes the helmet more compliant over a broader range of energy demand. So it's working sooner than a traditional helmet design because that liner is suspended and it's absorbing and managing energy during that suspended path. But I think we were kind of the rocket fuel, if you will, for MIPS, where it was pretty easy for the industry to go, oh, hey, I need something for rotational acceleration. This MIP solution is really good. It doesn't cost a whole lot. I can implement that and, incorporate that into my helmet without a lot of expense or re-engineering. And, those guys were off and running at the same time. So I think the positive, for the marketplace out of all of this is, helmets have gotten a lot better in the last 10 years. We'll have our 10th anniversary of sales this coming February, and we're looking forward to having some fun with that. But, the company's been around for 12 years. It took us 2 years to get that first helmet to market and start selling. And, it's just been, I can't believe it's been 10 years. I was just telling somebody yesterday, I was like, how did 10 years go by already?
Yeah, when you just said that, it hit me hard because I really, and I'm going to get to this in a minute, I really remember the first things where I really started noticing 6D was obviously with Eli and Zach Bell at Arlington in 2013. And we're going to get to that in a minute. But yeah, the fact that was 10 years ago, 12 years ago is insane. Like, we're getting old, Bob, very quickly. Yeah.
You're getting old. I'm already old.
Oh, stop it. You look good, man, out there at Glen Helen, man. You still got your youth. You look good. I want to ask you though, so you talked about trying to do these prototypes and taking them to testing. Like that can't be an easy process. Like you have to find, I'm assuming it's very expensive. Just the prototype's probably expensive. The testing's probably expensive. Finding the time, finding the proper ways to test a new system of helmets. That whole process had to be stressful and just wild.
Yeah, I really look back at that time of my life, and it was an interesting time. I was unemployed with an idea is basically what it came down to, and my wife was taking care of our kids that were in grade school at the time, and working part time as a substitute teacher. And I said, "Listen, I want to do this. I think I can do this, and I need you to go get a job, that can help us pay our bills." And and give me 1 year. And if I don't get it done, then we'll go get a job. But I believe we can make something better. And so that kind of, she agreed, and I think, there was some rough nights in there, when we were wondering if we did the right thing. I had one of my daughters was getting ready to go off to college, and, the other was a couple years behind. But anyways, we put our head down and started working on the helmet design. And that was tough. I had to buy a bunch of helmets. I had a few, and, I was trying to make some spare parts out of helmets and make a testable prototype out of helmets. And, I went and showed my concept to David Tom early, which I think was good. In fact, I know it was good because, he encouraged me, that, okay, it's kind of clever where you're going here, but you're going to have some real challenges, and I remember the whole thing fell apart on his desk when I showed it to him. I was almost kind of embarrassed about it, but, Dave encouraged me, and he connected me to Terry. And, when I went in to meet Terry, I had 6 helmets in my hand and they were all different, and we had, built them in my garage. And I got pretty proficient at carving EPS, with a rat tail file and for the outside surfaces. And I was using wire wheels on a Dremel on the inside, to shape these helmets and these shells into what I needed them to be. And then I was stuffing them in other helmets, in an existing helmet shell and taking it in and going to test it. I spent a lot of my own money, and I guarantee I didn't spend a dime on anything except food and my mortgage for that year. But I think it was July or June. We went in and did some testing with Terry, and the data was exceptional. I mean, significant improvements over the control model, which I had to have a brand new control helmet of the same model to test, so that the shell was, isolated from the testing, and that we were just testing the liner systems, And, we had numbers that were more than 100% improvement over the existing helmet. And our worst numbers were about a 25% improvement. If we were looking at HIC or, peak linear acceleration, rotational acceleration, the numbers were exceptional. And with that data, I was able to put together the rest of a business plan. I had already started it. I'd worked out some budgets and some things, but having the physical data from the testing allowed me to put the rest of the story together and then go try to raise money. And I'd never done that before, so it was completely foreign to me. And I was also, I told my wife, give me 1 year. I was in the 11th month before we started to find some funding. And, I've said before, we raised $1 million to start a company. And, when you look at Visus, that raised $93 million to make a football helmet, and I look at the $1 million, how hard it was to raise the first, $1 million we put into our company. I was pretty happy, but it allowed us to at least get started. But we had to sell helmets the first year, and we did, and we built the company from that investment and on to what it is today, and it continues to grow. And there's I'm pretty happy of the path it took. I think we did it. We did it better than what we could have done it, and we certainly could have done it better than we did it too. But you make mistakes and you learn and you grow through that whole process. And I wouldn't be here with 60 without a very small group of very passionate and important people in my life that helped us get started. And raising $1 million is not easy.
I would not think so. And the whole process, the company is so impressive. This what you've done, and it's not like you said. You could have maybe done it worse, right? You could have probably slacked on some things, but the fact that the helmet is tested so well. Like I'll mention Jason Thomas from Fly Racing. I'm friends with JT. When they were working on the formula, he mentioned how well the 6D, like how well it performed, and it outperforms the formula in some areas. Like, to have a competitor talk about how good your product is, that said a lot to me before I ever even tried one of your helmets.
So I think, I'm super proud of what we've accomplished. And, I think back to the trips that Robert and I made over to the factory in Asia, and we spent a lot of time in the first 2 years over at the factory. In fact, Robert spent a month and 5 weeks, I think, in one stint over there, the whole without coming home, and that was a hell of a commitment. And we laugh about it today. We got some pretty funny pictures of us. They gave us a room up on the 5th floor of their factory where we didn't have to worry about any of the other brands that might have been visiting, seeing what we were working on. And we got over there and we took a bunch of our tools, because the factory really doesn't have R&D equipment. They don't have fabrication tools. They just have production. They make helmets, and it's there's not like a tool shop in the back or a workshop in the back where you can go, hey, I want to trim on this visor or whatever. You can't do that.
Yeah.
And so we were laughing. They had this big mill that was on the floor that we were trying to use. We're like, no, we got to get this on a bench. We're not kneeling down at this thing all day. We just can't work that way, But we got through it, and it was that first year was all out of my pocket. And I guess, the foresight to get a great engineer involved in the project, and, to get Robert involved with me in the beginning was it allowed us to get the project done right. And it allowed us to build a foundation and a technology that really works well and does what it's designed to do. And then we've worked on improving that technology over that period of time since we started. And we've also worked hard to protect that technology. So that suspended liner, we've done a really good job of protecting the IP that goes along with that. And, that's a whole nother story of expense. But, we were smart early. And I think that, it was, that's paid dividends for us, because we've been able to keep our ODS system ours and exclusive to what we're doing.
All right. So once you have a product that you're happy with, you've got to get it on to people. You talked about having to have sales the first year. 2013, you get in with Geico Honda. How does that work? And then talk about, while discussing that, Eli in Oakland has a big crash, lands on his head in the whoops. Zach Bell, the big one in Arlington that everybody's seen, with no, they both passed concussion protocols that night. That's pretty impressive. But just talk about getting with Geico in 2013 and how that even worked out.
You know what? We got super lucky. I'm from New England. I know Ricky Ziggy up at Factory Connection, Rick Ziegfelder. I know him well from back in the day when we were both racing dirt bikes in New England. I knew we needed a platform, but I didn't have any money. And, I made a phone call, and we happened to catch those guys at the perfect time. They were looking for a better helmet. Darren Borcherding over there, who was the manager of the program on site, he was fully aware of what helmets weren't doing. And we had his interest immediately. He was very excited to see what we had. Rick also, they'd been through a couple of concussion-ridden seasons with a different helmet just the year before, and they were searching. So it afforded us an opportunity to, A, prove what we had worked, and B, get into a program that would normally be thousands and maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars to get involved with for very little expense, and the promise that we were going to keep the riders on the track. And that was hectic. Rick was super cool, and he said, well, listen, go see Eli at his ranch and let him test it. If Eli likes it, we'll put it in front of the rest of the group. And, that was Zach Bell and Osborne and Justin Bogle and Will Hahn. Oh, what a dummy.
Oh, yeah. I was blanking too.
Brain partying on Will. Will won a championship for us, and he's been amazing. But anyways, that trip to Colorado was really interesting. We spent about a full day with Eli and his family. We camped over at their place, and we rode the first day and then rode the second day on the motocross track. We spent the first day on the supercross track. And Eli liked the helmet straight away. We had him go out and ride in his Shoei. He came back in, sent him out in the 6D. He came back in after 15 minutes on the supercross track. We put him back in the Shoei. He went back out, did another moto, came back in. We put him back in the 6D. And then he never took the helmet off after that for the rest of the time we were there. And the cool thing, this would have been, I think it was like August of 2012, August of 12. And we left the ranch, and we had a wonderful time with the Tomacs. They were awesome. And I'm driving back to the airport, Robert and I got a text from Eli that said, "Hey man, work that out because I want to wear it at Monster Energy Cup." And I'm going, okay, well, that's great. It ain't happening by Monster Energy Cup,
Oh boy.
And so we ended up talking to the rest of the team. They all liked it. They had all had some, experiences with concussions that weren't good. And, they unanimously agreed, okay, this is the right direction. So we were off and running with Geico Honda. I promised Rick that we would have helmets for Anaheim 1, and we did, but it was by the skin of our you-know-whats. I mean, we barely made it, and we didn't have extra smalls. We only had medium shells. And, of course, Will and Zach and all those guys needed to be in small helmets, so we were padding those things out to make, so they fit them properly. It was just crazy. It's what it took. We did whatever it took to be ready. And I think the Dallas was the fourth or fifth race, whatever it was. It was the weekend of the Indianapolis trade show that the entire industry is at. It's the first place we were showing our helmet to the public. Well, not really the public, but it was the first place business event that we were doing. And we went to the trade show, had a very successful, Saturday, and everybody, a lot of people in our booth, and we were taking a few orders or whatever. And then we all run to one of my investors actually lives in one of our investors lives in Indianapolis. So we went to his house to watch the Supercross that night, and we're sitting on the couch, and Zach Bell pulls the whole shot, and we're all cheering. And then he just has that famous crash where he went to scrub that jump. His foot caught the lip. It peeled him off the bike, and he went from 30 feet up in the air to flat ground like a ton of bricks. And honestly, I thought we were out of business. They cut to commercial, and to me, it looked like he was out cold. And I'm just like, great. Yeah. I got a text from one of the mechanics that said, hey, he's up under his own power. And I was just like, oh, thank God. And he got up, and Zach definitely rung his bell. He probably should not have raced that night. I'll be the first to admit it, but I wasn't there, and he was cleared, and he went on to race from I think a second to a win in the last chance, or maybe a third or something to a second to qualify for the last chance qualifier, and then compete in the main event where he had another pretty good crash.
Yep.
But he was all good. And I think that was the crash that was basically seen around the world, because our phones blew up. And, my sales guy had one sales guy at the time. He had a text from a dealer that night that said 12 helmets Monday morning, please. It was just that nuts, So anyways, yeah, it just was crazy. That lit it off.
It's like a perfect storm.
Pretty much so, yes.
Okay, a couple more things before I let you go. The ATR 1 was the original helmet There's two models now. There's the ATR2. Can you tell me a little bit about the difference? And one thing that I thought was really cool is that your helmets are rebuildable to an extent. If there's no damage to the shell, they can be rebuilt for a cost, but a limited cost compared to the cost of a new helmet.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So the differences are numerous. Both helmets perform exceptionally well from an energy management standpoint. Early in the life of the company, the helmet's interior is softer than pretty much everybody else's out there. And we had customers that were upset because the helmets were destroyed after a crash, and they had just paid $745 for one. Particular gentleman out here in California that asked to meet us at Anaheim because he had gone through this a week after getting a brand new 6D. And so we met him at Anaheim, and he was telling me about his son that had a big crash in the whoops at a practice track and tore the bike all up and, wrecked the helmet and, the new helmet, we were going to give him a discount on a replacement, which we offer a crash replacement deal. But he was bummed. I mean, he had just spent $750 on his helmet and it was worthless. It was toast. And I just told him, I go, listen, is KTM buying you the new muffler and a new fender and a new set of bars for your bike? I said, I don't think so. It's those are consumable parts in a crash. Your helmet is a consumable item, and you've maybe never looked at it that way, but they're single impact devices, and our helmet is working different than anything else in the marketplace. It's working better and sooner in the impact event. And because of that, it's torn up and it's ruined. And so we started rebuilding the original ATR ones for customers. And it was basically remanufacturing the helmet because, it was not designed to be rebuilt. But man, I'm a racer, dude. I went to the races on my own, out of my own pocket for 15 years, as a local pro. And it's expensive. I know it, and I get it. And so my interest was getting that customer back using his helmet as long as the shell was okay for less expense. And so we did a bunch of rebuilds. By now, we've quit rebuilding ATR ones. We've reduced the price on them. Tooling's paid for, blah, blah, blah. The new helmet's out, and the new helmet's rebuildable. So there's the delta between the two products is, the flagship helmet, the ATR2, we improved the tech. We made it so that it could be easily rebuilt by an educated technician. And that's a service that we offer, and it's a service that no other manufacturer that I'm aware of offers today. There's certainly some liability that comes along with that, so we have to do it properly and track everything and make sure we're not putting a helmet that the shell's compromised back out into use. So that's the one caveat. If the shell's damaged, then the helmet cannot be rebuilt. But our customers seem to appreciate that, and I get it. If you have a young up and coming amateur kid that's got his sights set on a Loretta's championship and you're going to the big amateur races, you're going through a handful of helmets in the course of a year because he's hitting the ground pretty hard a number of times during the course of the year. It's part of our activity.
Yes.
So we respect that, and we've tried to do everything we can to control the expense.
You mentioned earlier when the idea came up so that you were working on the prototypes that you were asked, like, why aren't you involved with football helmets and other in military? Have other sports, football, baseball, et cetera, have there been companies that reach out to you, to discuss your technology, maybe get you involved, anything like that?
Yeah, and that's an interesting topic. We could probably talk for another hour about it. We actually do have a contract on a football helmet right now.
Okay.
And unfortunately, through COVID, the bottom fell out of this company's business. They kind of support the high school and Pop Warner section of the market, and they recently purchased a helmet company, so they're a young startup in their own right. And they needed a better technology, energy management technology for inside the helmet. So we contracted with them to do a football helmet. And unfortunately, for about a year and a half now, that project's been stalled. I don't know if it will ever see the light of day, but they seem to be getting going again, and hopefully that project can get started, because most of the hard work's done on our side. It could just be picked back up and put back into motion if they get properly funded and can drive it the rest of the way. But early on, I got myself in a little bit of hot water with my investors, just from the perspective that we had so many entities and people and markets coming to us to investigate our tech and consider using our tech, or having us make helmets for them. It's easy to get ahead of yourself. You get caught up in that, and now you're talking to an equestrian guy, and you spend a bunch of hours on that, and then you're talking to a skate guy, and then you're talking to a downhill skier. Bodie Miller's been into our shop talking about, okay, how do we put this into a ski helmet? And while you're not going to take a phone call from Bodie and say, no, don't come in, it's still time. And more than anything, one of the most valuable lessons I've learned from one of my mentors and one of my investors is you just can't get the time back. And I'm a passionate motorcycle and bicycle guy. I love everything two wheels, I don't care about three. I don't care about four too much. And I don't care about one. I care about two-wheeled activities. And so I just, I kind of learned through this period, that I need to focus my energy on what we're doing. And that's really been the change over the last 5 years, is I've just been really trying to focus more on our products, our helmet, our technology, and motorcycle and bicycle.
Okay. I appreciate that information. Last thing I want to say to you is, you are coming on board with the Moto X Pod show for 2023 through Vital, and I just want to thank you for your support of that. That means a lot to me as the host of the Moto X Pod show, so I just want to tell you thank you.
Yeah, you guys do a great job. We've been working with Vital for many years now, and we really appreciate the relationship. And, it's just been wonderful. I met you for the first time at the vet race, and it was nice to get you to meet you and get to know you a little bit that weekend. And I'm just looking forward to it. I've got a wonderful group of people here at 6D, and, we're working hard to continue to improve our helmets and our products and our offerings for the future. And, Vital will be, part of our, media and marketing efforts for many years to come, I'm sure.
That's wonderful to hear. Well, Bob, it has been very exciting, and I've learned a lot talking to you today, so I appreciate you coming on. It means a lot. I think everybody's going to get a lot out of this interview.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate the questions and the time also. It's been fun to sit and take a little bit of break. I could have been punching my calculator a whole bunch by now.
Yeah, nobody wants to do that.
Nice. Like I said in the beginning, it's nice to take a break from that from time to time.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for your time.
Okay. Take care. Thanks, Jamie.
Yes, sir.